So this is a starter model for the helmet. And I was trying several different approaches, but the one I ended up creating or ending up with is creating a couple of helper surfaces from circles, just basic circles really. And if I'm going to turn on, all the planes and the sketches that I have, kind of the starter sketches. So you see here that I have a kind of a reference side view on the front plane, just showing the kind of the what's oblong, I guess, element of the helmet, a couple of curves on either side. And kind of the meat of this right now is just these two circle sketches right here. This one up here, you can see there, that's the sketch for it. And another circle down here, and they're made off of planes referencing the top plane. So, and just a reminder, just if you do want to create a plane quickly from, let's say, let's say the front plane or the top plane, whatever, planes that you have already, you can hold down the control key. You can always, of course, just go reference geometry, plane, select the front plane and then go off of that, whatever distance. But a quicker way is just holding down control and just dragging it out. Just grabbing that plane, dragging it out, and it makes a new plane based on that plane. So it's parallel to that plane. And just a quick and easy way to do that. And you can add the parameters later, like the distance and stuff. So in this case, you can select the top plane, hold down control, and then just drag out another plane, and it just creates a new plane. So it's just a really quick way to do that. All right, and then you can just click on the number if you want more, and then just go from there. So that's how I just got a couple of quick planes off of that. And so a couple of circles. I did want to create these two helper surfaces first, so similar to the mouse, only instead of just a singular, just a simple extrusion like we did with the mouse, these have a draft angle because I wanted to loft from one edge to another edge from these helper surfaces, but I wanted them to have an angle to them so that I can then, when I loft, I can keep tangency to these helper surfaces, and it would create the circle basically based off of that. So if I look at I'm going to look at this first helper surface on top. So all it is just this circle extruded, and notice that there is a draft angle applied to it. So if I didn't have that draft angle, it just goes straight up, right? As you would expect an extrusion just to go straight up. But because this is a closed element, and I'm going to click on draft, the angle is included in there. So depending on what you need, here's, that's a 20-degree draft. Usually these are for, just like mold release, so it just separates from the mold, but you can use it to your advantage in this way, and just using a bigger number, in this case, 53 degrees. It's very close to this reference circle. And, the angle is already included. So I did the same thing to the bottom one. So kind of just wanted to be tangent this way. So that one is 34 degrees, a little bit less as it gets to the bottom. Okay, so now with this loft, so what I did was I selected the edges, not the circle sketches. Okay, so just make sure that you don't select. Remember, you can always use your selection filter. Remember, you hold F5 to get your selection filters here. And the one I used was filter edges, or the key E key. You can also hold down. So by selecting this, then you select only edges and not the sketch. Because remember, the edge is what has a reference to the angle of this surface. So that's important. Okay, so we'll put this back here. So I selected both edges. I selected tangent to face. So it's tangency to the face of this angled helper surface. So that's why it's getting this circular, quality to it. And you can play around too with, let's say the shape is a little bit more accelerated at the top as opposed to the bottom. You can play with these arrows. You can pull these arrows in and out, and notice that now this has a little bit more influence as it goes out. And maybe this has less of an influence. Bring this in, and I'm going to turn off all these other things. See that? So the starter, you can just play around with these and have a different shape to the helmet in subtle ways. You don't have to pull these too far out to get a kind of a dramatic change in your surface. So very little change, maybe the top has a more influence, and you can always have to kind of play around with exactly what those numbers are. Okay, so, and those translates into these, numerically they translate into these numbers here. So as I work the top number, this is set at 3.27 now. I think I started with about I think it was 1.35. So I'm going to undo that. Okay, it was 1.7 for the top and then 0.85 for the bottom. Okay, so they both have tangency to face applied to them. All right, so you can play around with those to get that specific shape. And then once the helper surfaces are used, you don't have to you don't have to keep them or show them. So I just hid them for now. So that's my starter surface there for the helmet. And notice that there's a hole up in the top there, right? And this is to keep from getting this those degenerate surfaces. The last thing I want is kind of all that data to go to one point at the very top, at the north pole of this. So to keep that from happening, that's why I fill the top of this. So I fill the top of this with the filled surface. So I just select the edge. I select filled surface. And I select curvature as the way it makes contact with this surface. By selecting curvature, it will follow the curvature of the top of the, of the side of the helmet, and it will complete, the top with that. All right, so it's perfectly smooth as it goes across that top. And if I look at my mesh, let's see a mesh preview of that. See, this is what you want. You want a nice grid up at the top without it, coming to a north pole. You don't want all those latitudes coming to one singular point, because, I might use this surface for something else, like the padding, or I might cut it in half or whatever, I might want to do. I want to just keep that very, very clean up at the top as well. So this is how I do it. I use the filled surface, curvature, continuity up at the top there. I don't think I need to do the optimized surface. So so pretty clean there. A couple of trims now. So one is to cut the side. So this is the profile that you can work on is in terms of what the side is going to look like. And this is just a simple, just side view trim, pretty standard trim there. I have these elements on the curvature combs on. So I'm going to turn that off. So there's the curve. And, you can change this around if you want to use this model. You can just change this around to create that, that's a very specific shape at that point, right? But just a standard trim, side view trim. Then the next trim was just cutting it in half again. Okay, sometimes I do that. Sometimes I'll get to a certain point and then I'll just cut the model in half just so that I can work on just half of it. Because I know that it's continuous as it goes across the middle. So by cutting it in half, you're not really doing anything. You're not breaking any kind of continuity rules at all. I know when I mirror this again, it's going to be perfectly smooth as it goes across the middle. Okay, so then I start the lip or the brim, really, right? I mean, I think it's called the brim of this area. So notice that I don't create this shape, the exact shape of that brim. You know, first I create the surface, and it's kind of the same thing that I've been saying all along, is to create these surfaces that are a little bit bigger, so that you can trim later on, and you have that, you know, you have that latitude to work with. You know, if you want to just slightly longer, you know, you just change one curve as opposed to changing a series of a network of curves. So that's and that was created with just a one sketch, right? That it has this eventually. This is kind of like a temporary face that's going to be created. This eventually is going to be curved. It's going to be filleted. So really, this is the face that I'm going to keep for this singular line. So that gets, oh yeah, there is one note here so that it doesn't continue all the way across the entire edge. So what I did to this spline, remember we did, I think it was week 2, kind of way back in a week, maybe 3. We were manipulating the spline, the original spline that created a trim. And let me go back to this. I'm going to turn this off. If you recall the split entities, remember that when you do a trim, the amount of entities that you have with your trim sketch reflects on the edge. So if you have a series of, so here I started out with one singular spline, and then at this point I got the split entities, and I'll add another split here. I'm just going to split this line. So now I split it here as well. And when you split the entities, it will affect the edge of the trim. So now that I have a split here and a split here, let me turn on my sketches. Let me show that one. So now that I have a split here and a split here, the edge will also have a split, or kind of at least a dividing element to it. So you can see that this edge has this segment here, and that's a direct result of a split on the on that trim sketch. So you can use that to your advantage, so that I didn't want this this boundary to keep going, because what I had before was just a smooth edge going all the way across, but I only wanted to use this much. So if I wanted to, so if I go back to it, so here's the sketch that I used for this direction 1, and for edge 2, I just used the split where this edge ends to create that that element. And there is another way. The good thing about boundary is it does have this advantage of being able to pull this element back and forth. So you could get a shorter one that way. But a lot of times, it's good to just say, okay, I want to end it very specifically at a sketch element, within my sketch, to control that edge. And some other tools that don't have that feature, like Boundary does, maybe like swept surface possibly. Like let's say you want to keep this angle all the way around, I would probably use the swept surface feature for that. And that way, let's say you want to keep, because Surface Sweep has a couple of other features that Boundary doesn't, you know, like maybe a keep path tangent, or maybe, what else does it have? I think it also has like a rotational thing, like you can twist something as it goes around an edge. So, you know, maybe you want to take advantage of some of this Surface Sweep features, but also control how far you want, you know, the sweep to go. So by cutting that sketch entity or splitting it, you're controlling how far over it goes, but not going, oh, you know, kind of overboard with it. So there you go. So that's a way to control that, using the split entities for that. Okay, so then from here, I did do a delete face on you know, this connecting element, and then I added a face fillet. So this one, I look at this feature, and just so you know, too, you know, when you go back on a fillet, when like you edit the fillet, it doesn't show you all the original options here. You should notice that I don't have those 4 choices anymore. You know, I already used face fillet, so that's what these options are for. So let me go back to this so I can show you how I started this fillet. So I go to fillet, and then here are my 4 choices. Obviously I can't just do a regular fillet because these 2 edges don't meet. And even if they did, they're 2 separate bodies, so it wouldn't work. So I would have to use face fillet anyway. So here's face fillet. So with face fillet, you go from one face to another face, even if they're separated by any kind of distance. So I'm going to select that face. Remember, this arrow points to the center of the fillet. And in this case, the center of the fillet is going to be out here. So I do have to change that. So I want the direction of the center of the fillet going out. And then you have to click on that second block, that second one, and the arrow is pointing the wrong way. So I want to point it up. And so full preview, let's see, I'm going to do curvature continuous, and it's not going to be symmetric. It's going to be a, let's see, face fillet options. Let's see how, just to make sure I did it the same way as before. Okay, face fillet. I think in this case, I selected one of these. Let me go back and see which one I actually selected. I'm sorry, it was the edges. Huh, okay. The profiles were those 2 edges. So let me go back. I just want to make sure that it wasn't necessarily the face, that it was the edge. So items to fillet. And okay, so I see, that's what I did with. Okay, so yeah, the face fillet in this case won't work because of the continuation. What it wants to do is get the entire edge of this. So I'm just recalling how I created it. So it is actually a loft that it ended up using. So sometimes a blend or a fillet is not necessarily, you're not using necessarily the fillet tool, but one of the other tools, in this case, the lofted tool. So let me go back here and do this. Actually, I just called it a fillet. That's what was confusing me. So, so there's lofted surface, and I'm going to go from, and just to make sure that I'm selecting edges and not sketches, I'm going to use the selection, edge selection. So it just goes from one to the other. And notice that it does also stop here. You know, it doesn't continue on to the entire rest of the, you know, of the edge, because of the split tool again. You know, the edge is divided because of the different entities on the sketch. Okay, so like if I want to delete that and go over here, it'll go to that element, right? So that's a way to control that. It really helps in controlling where do you want to, you know, where do you want to fill it to or blend to. So I'll just go back there. I always open up the start and end constraints to see exactly, you know, how do you want to start and end these elements. And in this case, I want to go curvature to face at the start down here, and end up here also curvature to face. So it's a really smooth blend between the two. So, and then again here you can, you know, extend these to create a little bit more influence. So maybe there is a flatter segment before it goes into the curve. Depending on your design, how you want to blend those two, you know, you may want to bring them in. So it creates a little bit less influence, and it creates a little bit more of a kind of a flatter in between. So that's all up to, you know, these arrows. Remember, they direct correlation to this number here. So if you want to reset it, just type in 1 on both. And it's going to just 50-50 there. And we won't worry about this yet. I mean, this little S curve here, that's going to go away when we do a final trim on this. All right, so let me get rid of that one. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new trim. And this new trim, basically you got rid of a little bit more material in here around the ear, and or maybe right in front of the ear. But this is where I wanted it to be really smooth as it goes across these two fillets elements there. So, and you know, so it kind of creates the character of this, the brim here as well. So I go back to the sketch. There's a sketch that, just to be sure that, you know, if you do want to create a new trim, and in this case, I think because I created a couple changes on this changed as well. Usually I like to keep this new trim inside of the old surface, because what happens is, I'll kind of exaggerate it here, but you know, like let's say you do this. What it's going to do is it's going to trim this out. It's going to cut this out, and it's going to create an edge right where this spline extends beyond this surface. So it's just going to create a break there. So that's why I like to keep it within, you know, this new trim, even if it's very close. I'm going to keep it within that. But, you know, if I look at the front from the side view, this is where this is going to get trimmed all the way through here, and just make sure that you're well inside of this area here. And remember, this is going to get projected from the side, front view. So that's how this got, you know, its final trim. So pretty nice clean edge as it goes across, you know, all three of these surfaces. You know, and that's how, and this is what you want. You know, you don't want to create, you know, this shape from the very beginning, right? You know, it's always, you know, make the surfaces a little bit bigger and then trim away from those. If I look at the face curves from that, there's a nice topology as it goes across that, right? There's no pinching right in this little small triangular area, which is what you don't want. All right, so good topology as it's going across the face of that. And this is the face curve. So what I'm using here to look at that topology, sometimes I don't even finish this feature. I don't click the OK, I just click the X. What I want to do is just review to see what the surface is doing underneath. So you can always increase this number if you need to. But yeah, so that's the face curves features, just so you know. There's 5 and 5. If you do say okay, remember that it is going to create 3D curves on top of that surface. So maybe you do need that. You know, maybe you want to create some kind of like a extrusion right down the center of this as it goes across the top. You know, you can create a 3D curve. That's basically what is created from those face curves. And then you can use that. Let's say I want to use this curve to do a swept surface. So this is, I'm going to use this curve, and I'm just going to use a circular profile. It goes across, and let's see, I'm going to use that one. You know, maybe you want to do that. You know, so I was able to use part of the surface without having to project anything, without even having to create a profile. You know, it's just a circular profile as it goes, you know, in front of that element. And there you go. So that's how to create, you know, something like that. If you don't want it circular, then you would just have to create your own, you know, your own profile. Let's say like a little flattened element, whatever it might be. And so that's, you know, always use what's already there. You know, in this case, you know, this surface, face curves, and then the swept surface to create this element over it. Okay, so I'll get rid of that for right now, along with those face curves. So I'm going to delete all those, say yes to all. I'm going to hide all my elements, hide alt type. So this is where I'm at right now. Then after that, it just gets knit. So there's the knit. So all this becomes all one body. These 3 elements are, I think, actually 4. And then the edge, kind of this padding on the edge. So this was just a circular sweep as well. So if I look at this feature, this is just a this swept surface with a circular profile. So I was able just to get the, one thing I did before this. So I did do one thing before this. And let me go up here, because I can't just get the edge from one element, because what's going to happen is the swept surface is going to end here, because you can only select one element. That's one of the downsides of a swept surface. You can select one entity basically, or one thing to sweep. So what I did was I started a new sketch, actually a new 3D sketch, and I selected the elements that make up that edge. So these 3 elements, and then selected convert entities. So by selecting convert entities, now I have, you know, one continuous curve as it goes across the edge there. And then what I did was I swept that curve, or that sketch, with a circular profile. So that created the, you know, that edge there. And I think this last sketch was related to the, actually I don't need that one. Let me delete that one. So there you go. So there's half of the helmet. So from here on, you know, the ventilation, the padding, all that, I'll get into that on the other model after the break. Okay, so so I'm going to upload this, and so you can use this as your starter model. So you can go off from this, you know, cut things out, use different, even, you know, modify the you know, the initial loft element to get a slightly different shape, and you know, just use it as a starter. Really, I mean, you know, you can really kind of do anything you want from this. So you can trim certain segments of these out. Maybe you just want to use one small part of this without the brim, you know, all that. So, and then I'll get into later, like, how would you make a sportier version of this or something, you know, maybe some more you know, like the speed form approach almost, but kind of in a vertical sense. So different ways to you know, to use this as a starter. Okay. Any questions off the bat here? All right, so let's, perfect timing right now. So let's take a break. I'm gonna stop recording